Have you ever wondered why some people instantly command respect while others unknowingly sabotage their reputation? Well, buckle up, because you're about to witness the most powerful moment of my personal story, when reality hit me like a ton of bricks, and I had to face the harsh truth about my own toxic behaviors. From gossiping slip-ups to trust-breaking mistakes, this is where everything comes full circle. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for the jaw-dropping revelation that changed everything. If you love real talk, eye-opening paging moments and stories that help you grow, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Together, we'll navigate the challenges of life and build genuine respect. Respect is one of those intangible yet powerful forms of currency that can enrich every aspect of our lives, from our personal relationships to our professional endeavors. We all seek it. Most people want to feel valued and appreciated by their peers, family members, and communities. Yet respect is also fragile. It can dissolve more quickly than we might expect, sometimes due to subtle or overlooked behaviors that erode the trust people place in us. In many instances, the respect we command is deeply tied to our daily habits, both big and small. The ways we speak, act, and respond in the myriad social situations we encounter carry immense weight. 4 specific toxic habits: gossiping, being unreliable, interrupting others, and complaining, are particularly harmful to any individual's reputation. They sap trust, disrupt rapport, and can create an environment of tension rather than understanding. While countless books and articles describe what it means to be respectable, the reality is that respect has a dual nature. On one side, it's about the image you project outward to the world. On the other, it's about your internal commitment to genuine virtues like honesty, empathy, fairness, and integrity. Stoicism, an ancient Greek and Roman school of philosophy, offers timeless principles that can guide us in refining the habits that either uphold or degrade our respectability. Think of the Stoics: Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. They valued rational thought, self-control, and an unyielding focus on personal virtue as the cornerstone of a well-lived life. Their teachings remind us that maintaining respect from others is deeply interconnected with our efforts to remain true to our values. Whenever we indulge in negative, destructive patterns like gossip or constant complaining, we distance ourselves from that Stoic ideal of internal consistency. In the pages that follow, we will explore each of these 4 toxic habits in detail, illustrating how they can slowly but surely undermine your reputation. We'll begin by examining the widespread appeal of gossiping, why it feels so irresistible, why it's so pervasive, and how it swiftly drains the trust others might have in us. From there, we'll move on to the issue of being unreliable, examining personal anecdotes and professional pitfalls that arise when we fail to follow through on what we promise. Next, we'll confront the problematic nature of interrupting others, a habit that signals disrespect for their input and ideas, whether we realize it or not. Finally, we'll tackle complaining, a pervasive mental and verbal pattern that not only brings our own mood down, but also repels people who might otherwise be supportive allies. My intention is to interweave personal stories, some embarrassing, some enlightening, that demonstrate how easily, and sometimes unintentionally, we all can slip into these toxic habits. Through these candid narratives, you'll see how I, like many, had to learn tough lessons about respect the hard way. By the end, we'll circle back to Stoicism, exploring how we can apply its main tenets, focusing on what we can control, demonstrating patience, and cultivating inner calm in order to break these destructive patterns. The goal is not just to illustrate the problem, but to equip you with practical strategies for living a life aligned with your highest ideals. If you've ever felt frustrated by others' loss of respect or noticed a corrosive tension in your relationships, this journey will offer insights on how to turn things around. Ultimately, recognizing these toxic habits is step 1. Transforming them into positive, life-affirming behaviors is step 2. By blending Stoic wisdom with modern-day scenarios, we'll uncover how each of us can navigate social minefields with grace, sincerity, and reliability. Let's begin by focusing on gossip, an age-old activity that has become a sort of social currency in itself, but one that carries far greater risks to our personal reputations than we might initially believe. Before diving into the habits themselves, let's take a moment to further explore Stoicism and how it remains relevant in our rapidly shifting modern world. Stoicism isn't simply the skill of gritting your teeth when faced with hardship, contrary to popular misconception. Rather, it's a set of philosophical guidelines aimed at helping individuals achieve serenity, virtue, and moral clarity, even in the face of life's inevitable challenges. Core to Stoicism is the principle that we should concentrate our energies on that which is within our control, our judgments, intentions, and actions, while learning to gracefully accept that much of what occurs around us is beyond our direct power to change. The Stoics championed traits like self-discipline, personal responsibility, and emotional resilience, believing these were key to cultivating an upright character. How does this translate to building or losing respect? When you understand your locus of control, you also realize you can't force people to respect you. Their opinions lie outside your direct command. However, you can consistently demonstrate behavior that is worthy of respect by embodying virtues such as honesty, reliability, and respectful communication. If the Stoics were to witness our everyday interactions, especially in a world dominated by instant communication, social media, and often superficial judgments, they might observe that we too frequently allow external factors to dictate our reactions. We gossip to bond with people, to gain social standing, or simply to fill awkward silences. We become unreliable by overcommitting in a relentless hustle culture, hoping to do it all but spreading ourselves too thin. We interrupt others out of an eagerness to prove our point or share our ideas, forgetting that conversation is a communal act, not a monologue. And we complain when we feel overwhelmed or helpless, venting our frustrations rather than seeking meaningful solutions. In many ways, practicing Stoicism is about applying a filter to your day-to-day life. The Stoics taught that each of us has the power to guard our tongues, a metaphorical way of saying we must think before we speak, interpret before we judge, and reflect before we act. This mindful approach doesn't mean you suppress your personality or your emotions, but that you learn to channel them in a constructive and intentional manner. Think of Epictetus's famous reminder, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This aligns beautifully with our examination of interrupting others, a habit that emerges when we flip that ratio, speaking too readily and not listening enough. Likewise, Stoicism helps us handle adversity without falling into the trap of incessant complaining. By focusing on the aspects of a problem that can be changed, we empower ourselves to find constructive paths forward. When you complain, you surrender a portion of your agency by implicitly suggesting you are at the mercy of external events. In truth, while external circumstances may be out of your hands, your response remains entirely within your domain. Recognizing and internalizing this is a game changer. As we embark on uncovering these 4 toxic habits, bear in mind that Stoicism doesn't merely want you to grit your teeth and ignore everything that goes wrong. It encourages awareness, introspection, and a willful decision to act in accordance with virtue rather than vice. Each of the behaviors we'll discuss, gossiping, being unreliable, interrupting, and complaining, directly contradicts Stoic virtues like honesty, fidelity to your word, patience, and constructive engagement with the world. As you read about these habits, consider not only how they resonate with your experiences, but also how you might apply the Stoic mindset to overcome them. Gossiping is pervasive. It has been a social pastime stretching back to ancient times. Some anthropologists even suggest that gossip played a role in forming social bonds in early human groups, as it allowed individuals to share pertinent information about who was trustworthy and who was not. In our modern context, however, gossip often devolves into malicious speculation, half-truths, or outright betrayals of confidence, all of which can cause more harm than good. When we talk about gossip here, we're addressing the habit of divulging personal details about others, often negative or salacious, that aren't ours to share, or spinning events in a way that tarnishes someone's reputation. It's easy to underestimate gossip's destructive power because it often masquerades as harmless chatter. You might be at a dinner party feeling slightly uneasy in a room full of people you don't know well. Then someone leans over with a juicy tidbit about a mutual acquaintance, perhaps the coworker everyone finds odd, or the friend of a friend rumored to be on the brink of a messy breakup. In that instant, you feel included, part of a secret circle that shares insider knowledge. The immediate gratification that comes from being in the know can be addictive. However, the cost is the erosion of empathy and trust. By broadcasting someone else's personal information without regard for its impact, we position ourselves as untrustworthy too. After all, if we're willing to dish out private facts about someone else, why wouldn't we do the same about the very people with whom we are sharing that gossip? My own experience in college drives this point home. I recall sitting in a dorm room with a few close friends, dissecting every aspect of our classmates' lives. Who was rumored to be interested in whom? Who was struggling academically? Who might have problems at home? Initially, these gossip sessions felt like a bonding ritual. We laughed over the stories, feeling a certain thrill in exchanging top-secret details. But one day, the circle turned against a friend of mine, Emily, who had confided in me about a private crush she was too shy to pursue. Hoping to seem interesting or entertaining, I revealed Emily's secret. Everyone pounced on it with jokes and teasing, which quickly spread across campus. Emily eventually found out, and the sorrow in her eyes the next time we met was unlike anything I had seen before. She was not angry in a demonstrative way, she was hurt and withdrawn. Our friendship was severely damaged, and I realized with a nauseating clarity that I was the one who betrayed her confidence. The Stoics would argue that a wise person avoids gossip because it distracts from tending to one's own character and obligations. By focusing on the mistakes or misfortunes of others, we put ourselves on a slippery slope of moral compromise. In the short term, gossip may bring fleeting enjoyment, but in the long run it sows seeds of mistrust and condemnation. Moreover, by indulging in gossip, we show that we lack respect for others' boundaries and narratives. It signals to the world that we may not be a safe repository for sensitive information, or that we thrive on negativity. If respect is built on trust, then gossip is the fastest way to dismantle that structure from within. The fallout from gossiping in a personal setting can be heartbreaking, but the repercussions become even more pronounced in a professional context, where trust and cooperation are paramount. Over the years, I've witnessed the collateral damage gossip can cause in workplaces. Teams that lose cohesion, coworkers who refuse to collaborate, and managers who become overly cautious in their dealings with certain employees. One particular memory stands out. I had a diligent coworker, John, who kept largely to himself but was dependable and thorough in everything he did. Then a rumor began to circulate about John's health. Apparently, he had taken a medical leave that involved some serious condition. At first, I didn't recognize this conversation as gossip. I told a couple of colleagues about the rumor under the guise of genuine concern, framing it as an opportunity for us to offer John sympathy or possibly help. Yet I neglected one crucial piece. John had shared details of his health privately, presumably expecting discretion. When he found out that his personal information had become water cooler talk, He was visibly hurt. He told me directly, in a calm but profoundly disappointed tone, that he was surprised I would publicize his health struggles to people he wasn't close with. His words, measured but pointed, stung deeply. I realized I had violated his trust, and in the process risked losing the respect not just of John, but also of others who would inevitably learn of my indiscretion. Gossip in the workplace often acts like poison. It seeps into the organizational culture, turning once supportive colleagues into suspicious bystanders, worried about what might be said behind their backs. Projects can suffer because of lack of cooperation, tensions escalate, and sometimes talented individuals leave toxic environments, feeling that their personal dignity has been compromised. Even more insidiously, gossip can spark misunderstandings and conflict that distract everyone from the actual work at hand. People waste time clarifying rumors, mending wounded egos, and guessing who said what about whom, rather than focusing on shared goals. From a Stoic perspective, indulging in gossip is a sign that we are too focused on external matters, others' opinions, mistakes, or personal affairs. Epictetus famously advised his students to pay attention to their own improvement rather than meddling in things that do not concern them. Gossip represents the opposite, a fixation on the lives and failings of others. This mindset prevents us from working diligently on our own growth, ironically stalling the self-improvement process that would make us more respectable in the long run. We end up investing our energy in petty chatter, which offers zero tangible benefit and often leads to reputational harm. Moreover, gossiping robs us of the chance to deepen relationships in a meaningful way. Conversations that revolve around rumor-mongering rarely foster genuine connection. They create alliances based on negativity rather than shared interests or values. People might unite over a piece of gossip, but that bond is paper-thin and can rapidly turn on any member of the group. If you want people to see you as trustworthy and respectable, consider how you handle sensitive information. Think twice before passing it along. Ask yourself whether sharing this tidbit truly serves a purpose. Does it uplift? Does it inform constructively? Or does it respect privacy? If the answer is no, it's best left unsaid. Shifting away from gossip isn't as simple as snapping your fingers and deciding never to do it again. The impulse to gossip can be surprisingly strong, especially when it's embedded in the culture around you. If your social circle thrives on discussing other people's personal affairs, it can be challenging to pull yourself out of that dynamic. But the path to change begins with awareness. Once you realize how destructive gossip can be, you have a strong motivator to shift your conversations towards something more constructive. The next step is intentionality, deliberately deciding to filter your words. The Stoics placed great emphasis on mastering one's speech, suggesting that guarding what comes out of your mouth is just as crucial as controlling your thoughts. Practically, you can implement a few strategies to break the gossip cycle. First, do a quick mental check before divulging any information about someone else. Ask yourself if it's your story to share. Have you been given explicit permission? If you have not, consider whether the need to know truly outweighs the potential harm. Second, steer conversations toward mutual interests, helpful exchanges, or personal experiences that you have every right to speak about. This might mean talking about hobbies, current events that impact everyone, or uplifting personal anecdotes. Of course, you can still discuss challenges you face or interesting observations, but do so without dragging someone else's name into it. Additionally, try to become comfortable with moments of silence in conversation. Many of us resort to gossip when we feel awkward or pressed to fill gaps in dialogue, believing that a juicy story will animate the interaction. Yet, a Stoic lens reminds us that silence is preferable to harmful chatter. Being mindful of the pace and tone of conversation can help you break the gossip habit. If someone else starts gossiping, you can gently redirect the conversation. Ask an open-ended question about a topic that doesn't involve dissecting someone else's personal business. It may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're in a group that thrives on this kind of talk. However, your willingness to pivot to a more respectful subject often speaks volumes. Over time, your circle of friends or colleagues may even come to see you as a model for how conversations can be both engaging and respectful instead of divisive. The Stoics also urge us to remember that each person we gossip about is a human being with fears, hopes, and vulnerabilities. If we adopt that perspective, we become more empathetic. We see others not as fodder for social currency, but as individuals deserving of our respect and careful consideration. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reminded himself that every person he meets is fighting a tough internal battle. With this in mind, the choice to share someone's private struggle without their consent becomes much harder to justify. And in that moment of hesitation, where you catch yourself about to gossip but decide otherwise, you reinforce a new, healthier habit that sets you on a path toward genuine respect and integrity. One of the lesser discussed aspects of gossip is what it does to your self-respect. Beyond the opinions others form of you, there's also an internal dialogue that takes place whenever you engage in behaviors you know are less than noble. You might feel a pang of guilt, a sense of having compromised your own values just to gain momentary social approval or to appear knowledgeable. Over time, these small breaches accumulate, eroding how you perceive your own moral standards. This internal erosion is often subtle, and many people try to compensate for it by rationalizing their actions, perhaps telling themselves that it wasn't really gossip, or that the person they talked about deserved it because of how they behave. But deep down, there's often a lingering discomfort. From a Stoic point of view, self-respect hinges on living in alignment with your principles. Epictetus would insist that you monitor not just your actions but also the attitudes that drive them. Whenever you gossip, you divert attention from your own personal growth and give in to the impulse to scrutinize others. You may do so under the guise of harmless fun or concern, but the Stoic call to personal responsibility reminds us that every word we utter shapes our character. If you habitually speak ill of others, it not only fosters a negative atmosphere but also trains your mind to be cynical, suspicious, or self-serving. It's worth noting that gossip can sometimes morph into a defensive mechanism when we feel insecure. We focus on someone else's failings to deflect attention from our own. However, in the long term, this doesn't help us evolve. Instead of facing our own shortcomings or seeking solutions, we create a toxic loop of criticism. People who rely on gossip as a social glue can become increasingly isolated, as their connections are built on fleeting negativity rather than genuine closeness. Conversely, when you decide to move away from gossip, you take a step toward building relationships founded on trust and respect. Those relationships tend to be more supportive and enduring because they are anchored in authenticity rather than in shared contempt for a third party. Another crucial point is that gossip often lacks a constructive element. If you genuinely believe a friend or colleague could benefit from feedback, then offer it directly to them in a respectful manner. This route, while sometimes uncomfortable, is far more aligned with both Stoic virtues and genuine empathy. Talking behind someone's back rarely solves any issues. It simply perpetuates them in the shadows. Stoicism encourages us to face problems head-on, guided by reason and a sense of moral duty. If we find ourselves criticizing someone's performance or life choices, the Stoic approach would be to consider whether we're in a position to help and then offer that assistance kindly and directly rather than broadcasting the person's shortcomings to a crowd. As we close out this section on gossip, keep in mind that the patterns we've identified, breaches of trust, the pursuit of social currency, and the erosion of self-respect, can resonate in other areas of life as well. Gossip may be the most commonly recognized toxic habit, but it certainly isn't alone in its ability to corrode respect. The Stoic lesson learned here is that losing respect, whether from friends, co-workers, or even ourselves, often happens through daily increments of negative behavior rather than dramatic, singular events. It's like water slowly wearing down a rock. Eventually, an impression is made that can be very hard to undo. In the next sections, we'll explore how being unreliable can transform from a mere inconvenience into a severe breach of trust. Many of us have found ourselves making promises we can't keep, whether intentionally or otherwise. Over time, those missed deadlines, tardy arrivals, and abrupt cancellations send a loud message to others that we're not to be counted on. In doing so, we risk losing their respect just as tangibly as we do by spreading gossip. So take a moment to reflect on how gossip has manifested in your own life. Perhaps you rarely indulge in it, or maybe you now realize it's been more present than you'd care to admit. Either way, recognize that by tackling gossip, you're not just avoiding a common social pitfall, you're also strengthening the foundation of your relationships, both personally and professionally. With that in mind, let's pivot to the next toxic habit, the tendency to be unreliable. While gossip may affect how people perceive our moral character, unreliability strikes at the heart of whether people can trust us to do what we say we will do. Let's delve into why reliability is so crucial, how failing to live up to our commitments chips away at respect, and what we can do to align our actions with our promises. As we proceed, continue applying Stoic principles of introspection and honesty, asking yourself how often you've overlooked the importance of reliability, perhaps with unintended consequences. Being unreliable can manifest in various ways: consistently arriving late, failing to complete tasks on time, or backing out of commitments without a valid reason. On the surface, these transgressions might appear minor or easily excused by busy schedules, personal crises, or simple forgetfulness. But as minor lapses accumulate, they form a narrative that you are someone who cannot be counted on. This narrative has dire consequences for the respect others hold for you. Trust and reliability are inseparable. When you demonstrate that your word doesn't carry weight, you are essentially sending a message that respecting your commitments is optional. Think of times you planned an event, and someone who had enthusiastically agreed to help didn't show up at all. The frustration, disappointment, and even hurt feelings you experienced in that scenario highlight just how crucial reliability is to forming a cohesive, social, and professional fabric. My personal journey with unreliability began in my early 20s. I was juggling multiple responsibilities: work, social life, family obligations, and in my eagerness to be part of everything, I overcommitted chronically. Invitations to social events piled up, deadlines at work overlapped, and I would promise to help friends with tasks while barely having time for my own. Instead of setting realistic limits, I kept saying yes to everyone. Perhaps partly because I wanted to be liked, and partly because I overestimated my capacity to handle multiple obligations. Predictably, the outcome was a string of cancellations and disappointments. At first, I justified these no-shows. "I'm just too busy, my friends should understand," or "work is chaotic, people will see I'm trying my best." But repeated lapses caused my peers and supervisors to lose confidence in me. Invitations dwindled, and my credibility at work took a hit. The Stoics would label this a clear case of allowing external pressures to override our internal capacity for reason and discipline. We let our anxieties or desire for social approval lead us into a pattern of hollow promises. Moreover, there's a moral dimension often overlooked. When you fail to do what you said you would, you might be inconveniencing or harming others, albeit unintentionally. If you promise to be part of a group project and then fail to deliver your share, your teammates are forced to shoulder the extra load. If you say you'll meet a friend for coffee and back out last minute multiple times, they might start questioning not only your sincerity, but also whether you truly value their time. These scenarios chip away at the pillars of respect and trust, essentials for any enduring relationship. In the context of Stoicism, reliability can be seen as a form of integrity. You align your actions with your words, and both are guided by reason rather than impulse or fear of missing out. Marcus Aurelius emphasized the importance of consistently doing your duty, whether it's small or large, seen or unseen by others. By being reliable, you align yourself with a virtue-based life where your commitments stand for something. This stands in direct contrast to unreliability, where your promises become negotiable based on convenience or fleeting emotions. When people observe that your word consistently aligns with your actions, they are more inclined to respect and trust you. And let's face it, it feels far better to live a life where you don't need to make excuses or scramble to justify your absences. There's a particular incident I still recall vividly. One of my close friends, Sarah, had a milestone birthday and spent weeks meticulously planning a party. She was someone who rarely threw big gatherings, so it was evident that this event was important to her. She sent invites well in advance, booked a small venue, and even prepared personalized gift bags for each attendee. I had assured her multiple times that I would be there and that I was excited to celebrate. Yet, on the actual day, a work deadline popped up unexpectedly, largely because I had procrastinated, and I decided at the last minute that I couldn't make it to her party. Rather than calling her in a timely manner, I sent a brief text message about 2 hours after the party was supposed to start, saying I couldn't come. When I finally followed up with a phone call the next day, Sarah's disappointment was palpable. She wasn't furious in the overt sense. She was subdued, and it felt like something between us had cracked. The person who had always been there for me realized, in that moment, that I hadn't bothered to align my actions with the importance of the event. It wasn't just about the missed party. It was a betrayal of the faith she had placed in my commitment. Over time, we drifted apart as she stopped inviting me to events and indeed ceased confiding in me as often as she had before. Initially, I resented her withdrawal, but with some introspection, I recognized I was the one at fault. This experience captured, in a painfully personal way, the essence of being unreliable, the gap between your stated intentions and your actual behavior. The frustration it causes can linger for a long time, particularly if the other person invested considerable emotional or logistical effort. The Stoic principle that we ought to be mindful of the impact of our actions on the community resonates here. While Sarah never demanded a formal apology, and I offered a few half-hearted ones, the reality is that my flakiness resulted in tangible harm to our friendship. According to Epictetus, our responsibilities extend not only to ourselves, but also to how we engage with and support the people around us. Every broken promise signals a form of disregard for that principle of communal well-being. Upon reflecting on this event, I realized how easy it is to slip into unreliability when you put your needs and anxieties first, especially if you assume people will perpetually understand your excuses. It's crucial to note that life is unpredictable, and sometimes emergencies or legitimate constraints arise. However, the pattern of consistently failing to meet obligations, especially without clear communication, is what brands you as unreliable. Had I at least informed Sarah in a timely manner with genuine regret, the damage might have been mitigated. Instead, I let the moment pass until it was too late, which doubled the sense of disrespect. This story stands as a personal testament to the notion that reliability is not just about punctuality or performing tasks. It's about honoring the trust people invest in you. Unreliability doesn't limit its impact to personal relationships. It can derail professional aspirations with alarming speed. In workplaces, credibility is often built on two pillars: competence and consistency. You might be highly skilled, but if your colleagues or bosses can't trust you to deliver on time, your reputation will take a hit. I recall a particularly stark wake-up call in my early professional life. In my eagerness to impress, I volunteered for multiple projects simultaneously. Each project manager, thrilled to have an enthusiastic helper, assigned me various tasks. Initially, I juggled them well enough, pulling late nights and swallowing stress, but as the workload expanded, my capacity to handle all tasks effectively shrank. Deadlines were missed, emails went unanswered, and some of my colleagues had to step in to cover the gaps. When my annual review came around, I expected at least some acknowledgement of my hard work. Instead, my manager cut right to the chase. Your output is high quality when it's done, but too often it's not done on time. We can't rely on you. That stung more than any direct insult because it was the truth. My unreliability was a liability to the team, and no amount of charm or technical expertise could compensate for repeatedly failing to meet commitments. The realization that my reputation was that of someone who might or might not come through forced me to reassess how I managed my commitments and time. In Stoic terms, I had failed to exercise prudence, or practical wisdom. Prudence in Stoicism involves recognizing your limitations and aligning your actions with what is realistically achievable. Overcommitment may stem from a desire to please or to prove oneself, but it disregards the Stoic principle of moderation. You can't be everything to everyone if it means sacrificing the integrity of your promises. A Stoic would advise setting boundaries, learning to say no when necessary, and doing so with clarity and honesty. That way, when you do commit to a task or promise, you can fulfill it without undermining your overall sense of balance. Moreover, unreliability can create a domino effect in professional settings. If a coworker relies on you to complete a portion of a task, their work may stall if you fail to deliver. This can impact deadlines for an entire team, possibly even a company's ability to fulfill a contract or satisfy a client. Over time, word spreads. Managers discuss these issues behind closed doors, colleagues share cautionary tales, and you become the person no one wants to partner with on important projects. In this way, being unreliable doesn't just affect personal feelings, it can have serious financial and career ramifications. On the flip side, demonstrating reliability consistently can act as a catalyst for professional growth. People appreciate teammates who can be counted on, and leadership roles often naturally fall to those who handle responsibility well. Just as gossip can be countered by mindful communication, unreliability can be addressed through a mix of self-awareness, strategic planning, and Stoic discipline. The first practical step is to take a comprehensive inventory of your commitments. List out everything you've agreed to: work, projects, personal errands, social engagements, and examine if your current schedule is realistically manageable. Stoics emphasize honesty, both with oneself and with others. If you see that your obligations surpass your available time or energy, consider renegotiating deadlines or declining non-essential tasks. It may feel uncomfortable to say no or to admit you need more time, but that discomfort is far less damaging than repeatedly missing deadlines and losing respect in the process. Another approach is to adopt systems that reinforce reliability. Keep a calendar, digital or paper, and log every commitment. Utilize reminders, task management apps, or even a simple daily to-do list to ensure you don't accidentally let something slip through the cracks. Communication is also paramount. If you see that a project or obligation is hitting an unexpected roadblock, inform the relevant parties as soon as possible. People are generally more understanding when you proactively address a delay rather than springing it on them last minute. This principle aligns with Stoic teachings that encourage clear and reasonable communication. Rather than waiting until panic sets in, address the issue when it's manageable. Time management is another crucial component. Many unreliable individuals are not inherently careless, they simply have poor time estimation skills. They underestimate how long tasks will take, or overestimate their own capacity to multitask efficiently. Stoic discipline involves self-restraint and a realistic understanding of limitations. If you consistently find yourself rushing to complete tasks in the 11th hour, you might need to build buffer zones into your schedule. For instance, if you think a certain assignment takes 2 hours, allocate 3 in your planner. This safety margin ensures you have room to deal with unforeseen complications. Lastly, consider the emotional and psychological elements. Sometimes we fail to follow through not because we lack time, but because we dread the task or face mental blocks. A Stoic perspective would encourage you to confront these feelings head-on. If you find a particular responsibility daunting, break it into smaller, more manageable steps, and tackle each step with calm determination. You might be surprised how quickly reliability becomes a habit once you adopt a structured approach and a Stoic mindset that prioritizes honoring your commitments. Moving on to the third toxic habit, interrupting others. We enter a territory where subtlety plays a big role. Many people interrupt conversations without fully realizing they're doing so. They might think they're showing enthusiasm, or that they're contributing valuable insights. Yet from the perspective of the one being interrupted, this behavior can signal disrespect, impatience, or arrogance. Interruption can abruptly cut off someone's train of thought, leaving them feeling unappreciated or marginalized. If repeated frequently, it creates a dynamic where only the loudest, most insistent voices are heard, while quieter but potentially insightful contributors are sidelined. On a personal level, I used to be a chronic interrupter, especially in group settings where brainstorming and high energy were the norms. I believed I was showing active engagement. If I had an idea, I wanted to voice it immediately, lest I forget. This was especially true in work meetings. I'd cut someone off mid-sentence to propose my own angle, or to complete their thought for them. While I rationalized that I was being efficient, why wait for them to finish if I could already see where they were headed? The reality was that my habit prevented me from fully listening. After a particularly tense meeting, my manager pulled me aside to say that I was hindering the group's dynamic. People felt overshadowed and some were hesitant to speak up if they sensed I might jump in. The manager's comment that stuck with me most was, "You're not listening, you're only waiting to talk." Such moments underscore a core Stoic principle: treat others as fellow human beings worthy of dignity and respect. When you interrupt, you place your perspective above theirs, effectively ignoring that they too have valuable insights. Listening is an active process, one that requires patience, empathy, and an open mind. Seneca wrote extensively about the value of measured, thoughtful conversation. The Stoics prized brevity and the ability to pause before speaking, ensuring that words carried meaning rather than mere noise. Interruption, by contrast, is impulsive. It thrives on the ego's desire to be heard immediately, and it lacks the Stoic virtue of self-restraint. In social and professional circles, frequent interruption can damage relationships. People may start avoiding deeper discussions with you, anticipating they won't be able to express a full thought. Over time, this dynamic isolates you from crucial information or unique perspectives, stifling both your social and intellectual growth. Furthermore, those on the receiving end of constant interruptions might label you as dismissive or egotistical. Even if you don't intend to be, perception often becomes reality in social contexts. Therefore, correcting this habit is essential if you seek to cultivate an environment where trust, respect, and genuine dialogue flourish. While the workplace scenario put a spotlight on my habit of interrupting, a more personal incident truly opened my eyes to the emotional toll it can take on others. I was out with a group of friends, and one of them, someone who generally kept his troubles to himself, began sharing a deeply personal struggle with anxiety. We were seated at a small table in a bustling bar, and perhaps because of the ambient noise or my own ingrained habit, I jumped in halfway through his story. I offered my own experience with stress and panic attacks, thinking I was showing empathy. Instead, I ended up derailing his moment to speak openly, effectively hijacking the conversation. His face shifted from tentative openness to guarded disappointment. He looked me square in the eye and asked if he could finish. Instantly, the atmosphere changed, and I realized that my interruption had a deeper emotional implication than I had expected. He eventually explained that he rarely discusses his anxiety because he fears people won't take it seriously or will immediately shift focus to themselves. My well-intentioned but poorly timed interruption confirmed his fear. This was a gut-wrenching moment of self-awareness. I recognized that while I had been so eager to connect by sharing my own experiences, I had, in fact, minimized his by not letting him complete his thoughts. In Stoic parlance, I had failed to exercise compassion and patience, crucial components in forming bonds of mutual respect. The Stoics often highlight that real empathy involves listening attentively, not just waiting for your turn to relate someone else's plight to your own narrative. After that evening, I made a conscious decision to improve my listening skills, especially in emotionally charged conversations. I realized that when someone is opening up about something meaningful or painful, they deserve uninterrupted space to articulate their feelings. Jumping in prematurely can rob them of the catharsis or validation they might be seeking. The friend did finish his story, and I apologized afterward, clarifying my intention was to empathize, but acknowledging I had gone about it the wrong way. Over time, he forgave me, and I learned a valuable lesson. If you truly value someone, you let them speak. The Stoic approach would be to pause, breathe, and ensure you comprehend what's being said before crafting your response. This fosters understanding and strengthens your interpersonal connections, ultimately laying a firmer groundwork for respect. To break the cycle of interruption, one must develop a skill set that emphasizes mindfulness in conversation. First and foremost, practice active listening. This means focusing on the speaker's words, tone, and body language rather than rehearsing your response. You might nod or give small verbal acknowledgments like "I see" or "that makes sense" to let the person know you are attentive. Only after they have paused or concluded their point should you offer your thoughts. This practice might feel cumbersome at first, especially if you're used to jumping in as soon as an idea forms in your mind. However, it quickly becomes second nature once you realize how much richer and more respectful conversations become. Another practical method is the 2-cap rule. Force yourself to wait 2 full seconds after the speaker finishes talking before you start your response. This micro-pause ensures that the speaker truly has concluded their sentence, and it gives you a moment to reflect on the best, most thoughtful reply. Stoicism teaches the importance of measured responses rather than impulsive reactions, and this method aligns well with that philosophy. You might be surprised at how many times someone takes a breath and continues speaking if you just give them a bit of space. Also, introspect about why you interrupt. Are you worried you'll forget your point if you don't blurt it out immediately? Consider jotting down a brief note so you can come back to it later without cutting someone off. Are you trying to prove your knowledge or competence? Reflect on how real confidence doesn't require constantly showcasing your insights at the expense of others. Seneca pointed out that a wise person speaks when they have something meaningful to say, not merely to fill silence or to dominate a conversation. Finally, it's okay to apologize if you slip up. Stopping mid-sentence and saying, "I'm sorry for interrupting you, please continue," can do a lot to repair any tension. This immediate acknowledgement of your slip both demonstrates humility and signals respect. Over time, these small efforts form a new habit of thoughtful engagement, elevating the quality of every conversation you partake in. Having covered gossip, unreliability, and interruption, we now turn to one final toxic behavior: constant complaining. Much like gossip, complaining drains the room of positivity and can quickly diminish people's desire to spend time around you. Yet it often stems from feelings of frustration, stress, or disempowerment. In the next part, we'll delve into how complaining can sabotage your well-being and your relationships, and how Stoic principles can guide you toward a more solution-focused approach. Complaining is arguably the most pervasive of the four toxic habits because it can so easily slip into our daily routines. It often masquerades as harmless venting, a way to share our day's frustrations or bond with others who feel the same way. Yet chronic complaining, where negativity becomes a default mode of expression, can rapidly sour both your outlook on life and the perceptions others have of you. By constantly pointing out what's wrong, be it with your job, your friends, the weather, or society at large, you create an atmosphere that drags people down. In essence, complaining is like secondhand smoke. Even if you're the one doing it, those around you inevitably feel the toxic effects. Over time, this behavior can repulse the very individuals you might want support or camaraderie from, leaving you isolated in your own cycle of negativity. My own tendency to complain peaked when I was in a job that I found extremely stressful. The workload was daunting, management seemed disorganized, and I felt undervalued. Rather than proactively looking for solutions or alternative avenues to handle the stress, I chose to complain. I'd gripe to coworkers during lunch breaks, send long rants to friends via text, and even used family gatherings as a forum to unload my grievances. Initially, this felt cathartic. People sympathized, nodded, and added their complaints, creating an echo chamber of shared discontent. But as time went on, I noticed fewer people were reaching out to me. My messages went unanswered for longer, and "let's catch up" invitations turned scarce. Finally, a close friend pointed out, with sincere concern, that every time we spoke, I had nothing positive to say. She felt drained and helpless, unable to pull me out of what seemed like a self-imposed gloom. In Stoic teachings, complaining falls under the category of focusing on external events that you either cannot control or choose not to actively address. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself of the fleeting nature of life and the importance of directing his energy toward constructive action. By endlessly complaining, we not only neglect meaningful solutions, but also train our minds to dwell on the negative aspects of any situation. This negativity can become so habitual that we stop noticing anything worth appreciating, whether it's small daily joys or even significant accomplishments. Other people pick up on this shift, sensing that any interaction with us is likely to spiral into a torrent of complaints, making them wary of engaging fully. A revealing example of the destructive power of complaining occurred during a group project in my university days. I was part of a team of 5 students, all equally responsible for researching and presenting on a complex topic. Among us was Mike, who seemed to have a complaint for every stage of the process. He disliked the professor's instructions, found the grading rubric unfair, believed the library resources were inadequate, and grumbled about how the rest of the team was behind schedule. At first, we tried to sympathize, acknowledging that some of his points were valid. The assignment did have its flaws, and the timeline was indeed tight. But Mike refused to transition from complaining to finding a solution. Suggest working sessions? He claimed it was too time-consuming. Ask the professor for clarification? He insisted the professor wouldn't care. Look for alternative resources online? He doubted anything would be relevant. Within just a few weeks, the mood in the group deteriorated. Every meeting felt weighted down by negativity and a sense of futility. No matter how enthusiastic the rest of us tried to remain, Mike's complaints acted like an anchor, dragging morale to the depths. Eventually, one of our team members took the initiative to speak with the professor for guidance, and we found a more efficient way to divide the workload. But by then tensions were high and our collaborative spirit had significantly eroded. Even after the project was finished, none of us were keen to work with Mike again, despite his intelligence and potential for valuable contributions. His chronic complaining overshadowed any positives he brought to the table, leading us to associate him primarily with negativity rather than capability. From a Stoic perspective, Mike's behavior showcased a fixation on external factors. Epictetus taught that suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our judgments about these events. By labeling every hurdle as insurmountable or every rule as unfair, Mike essentially created a self-fulfilling prophecy of dissatisfaction. He was so wrapped up in what he perceived as the project's flaws that he failed to see the avenues for improvement. Moreover, his complaining didn't just affect him, it permeated the entire group's experience, proving that negativity has a social contagion effect. Once morale dips, it can be a steep climb to restore unity and motivation. Chronic complaining can have long-term emotional and social repercussions. Emotionally, it fosters a mindset of learned helplessness. By continuously vocalizing the problems in our lives, everything from minor annoyances like traffic jams to more serious issues like workplace injustice, we condition ourselves to see adversity as inevitable and insurmountable. Each complaint becomes an affirmation that life is inherently difficult and that we are powerless to make meaningful changes. Over time, this bleak outlook can contribute to depression and anxiety as the brain becomes wired to anticipate negative outcomes. When every challenge is met with an exasperated sigh, we lose both the motivation and the creativity needed to find solutions or adapt effectively. Socially, chronic complaining isolates us. Even the most compassionate listeners have their limits. People often start by empathizing, offering a supportive ear or valuable advice, but as the complaints multiply, they might sense that their empathy is being taken for granted and that you're unwilling to consider proactive steps. They may back away, either physically by avoiding contact or emotionally by not engaging in deep conversations anymore. This creates a vicious cycle. Feeling lonely or misunderstood might lead you to complain more, which then alienates people further, exacerbating your sense of isolation. Friendships become superficial or fade entirely. Professional relationships suffer as well because coworkers are less inclined to collaborate if they anticipate that most interactions will revolve around your complaints rather than constructive dialogue. In the Stoic tradition, the antidote to complaining lies in understanding and embracing what you can control while calmly accepting what you cannot. This doesn't mean passively resigning yourself to injustice or inefficiency. Rather, it means channeling your energy into making the improvements that are within reach and adopting a measure of serenity about the things you can't alter immediately. When you catch yourself about to complain, ask, "Is this situation within my power to change? If yes, what steps can I take right now? If no, can I adapt my perspective to minimize stress and maintain emotional equilibrium?" This mental practice shifts you from a victim mindset to one of mindful agency. Even if the situation is genuinely tough, recognizing that you have the capacity to respond with composure and initiative can significantly reduce your impulse to vent negativity. In the end, Stoics believe that a life of dignity and self-respect is more fulfilling than one spent listing all the ways the world has wronged you. To transition away from chronic complaining, self-awareness is crucial. As with the other toxic habits, the first step is to catch yourself in the act. Notice when your conversations veer into repetitive negativity. Journaling can be a valuable tool. At the end of each day, jot down instances when you complained. What triggered it? Were you seeking sympathy, hoping to initiate change, or simply venting without purpose? Once you've identified patterns, you can devise strategies to address them. For example, if you often complain about feeling overworked, consider proposing a revised schedule to your boss or redistributing tasks among your team rather than stewing in resentment. If traffic is your perpetual gripe, brainstorm alternatives. Carpooling, listening to educational podcasts to make the time feel more productive, or exploring flexible work hours if possible. A key Stoic approach is the practice of negative visualization. Rather than complaining about minor irritations, imagine how the situation could be worse. This isn't to dwell in gloom, but to foster gratitude for what you do have. For instance, if you're stuck in traffic, think about how much more challenging it would be if you had no car at all, or if you had to navigate a complex public transportation route daily. By reframing the scenario, you often realize that your complaint stems from a place of relative privilege. This shift can diffuse the frustration and remind you that many aspects of your situation are actually decent or even favorable. Additionally, cultivate solution-oriented language. Instead of saying, "This is so unfair, I can't deal with it," ask, "What options do I have to improve this?" Or "What resources am I not using yet?" This approach aligns seamlessly with Stoic teachings that prioritize action and rational problem-solving. Complaining might offer temporary relief, but taking constructive steps, however small, creates tangible shifts in your circumstances. You may also want to surround yourself with people who share a proactive mindset. While it's helpful to have supportive friends who will listen to your vents occasionally, if your social circle primarily consists of chronic complainers, you'll find it more challenging to break the cycle. Consider adding relationships that encourage personal responsibility and positivity, and be open about your desire to change your own pattern of complaining. In doing so, you create accountability for yourself, since these friends or mentors can gently remind you when you slip back into negativity. Now that we've covered all 4 toxic habits, gossiping, being unreliable, interrupting others, and complaining, it's useful to see how they interrelate through a Stoic lens. Each habit erodes respect, primarily because it involves a breach of some fundamental moral or social contract. Gossiping violates trust and empathy, focusing on others' private matters rather than minding one's own character. Unreliability breaks the implicit promise that your word or commitment will stand firm. Interrupting others neglects empathy and patience, sending a message that your thoughts matter more than anyone else's. Complaining finally fixates on external factors in a way that drains the energy of both the complainer and those around them. Stoicism promotes virtues such as wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. In grappling with these 4 habits, you'll notice each virtue can serve as an antidote. Wisdom helps you discern what is worth sharing in conversation and what is not, countering gossip. Courage empowers you to admit when you are overcommitted or have made a mistake in fulfilling obligations, addressing unreliability. Justice underpins respectful communication, avoiding interruptions, as it demands fairness and consideration for all voices in a dialogue. Temperance involves self-control, which is crucial for curbing both impulsive interruptions and endless complaining. By consciously practicing these virtues, you aren't merely stopping a negative habit, you're nurturing a far more admirable and sustainable way of living that fosters respect both from yourself and others. Another common thread is the importance of self-awareness and deliberate choice. Each of these toxic habits often arises from unconscious or reflexive behavior. You gossip without realizing the harm, you bail on commitments without considering the consequences, you interrupt out of eagerness, and you complain out of frustration. Stoicism calls for a mindful existence, where you don't operate on autopilot but pause to evaluate your decisions. This mindfulness acts as a gateway to self-improvement. The moment you recognize you're about to share a piece of gossip, you can decide to stop. When you notice your schedule is too full, you can renegotiate responsibilities rather than waiting to fail. If you catch yourself speaking over someone, you can immediately apologize and let them continue. And each time you feel the urge to vent, you can ask whether there's a constructive action you could take instead. Concrete steps can help you transform these principles into daily practice. Let's outline some suggestions for each habit. Gossip. Implement a think twice rule before sharing a story about someone else. Ask if it's factual, helpful, and yours to share. If you must discuss a sensitive topic, do so with someone who genuinely needs the information, like a supervisor or a mutual friend who can offer solutions, not as idle chatter. Build empathy by consciously viewing the person you're discussing as a full human being, not merely the subject of a juicy tale. Unreliability. Maintain a clear schedule or task management system. Practice saying no when you know your plate is already full. If you realize you can't honor a commitment, communicate this as soon as possible and propose alternatives or solutions. Interrupting others. Exercise the 2-second rule. Wait a couple of seconds after someone finishes speaking to ensure they're truly done. Practice active listening by summarizing what the other person said before offering your own viewpoint. When you slip up, own it. I apologize for interrupting. Please continue. Complaining. Keep a complaint journal to track patterns and triggers. Conduct a Stoic audit. Identify what's within your control and concentrate on actionable steps rather than lamenting circumstances. Surround yourself with problem solvers who model constructive dialogue. If you must vent, do so briefly and then shift focus to potential solutions. Remember, you don't have to master all these changes overnight. The key is consistency and a willingness to learn from mistakes. Each time you catch yourself falling back into one of these habits, regard it as an opportunity for growth rather than a moral failure. The Stoics often spoke of life as a series of daily trainings or exercises, each one drawing us closer to a more enlightened, balanced state of being. By implementing these strategies, you progressively rewire your behavioral defaults, turning what was once toxic into something that supports your reputation and fosters genuine respect. In sum, each of the 4 toxic habits discussed, gossip, unreliability, interrupting, and complaining, operates like a subtle thief of respect, stealing it bit by bit until the loss becomes glaringly evident. The good news is that these habits are not immutable traits. They're learned behaviors that can be unlearned with enough self-awareness and deliberate effort. Stoicism provides a robust philosophical framework for doing just that, reminding us that while we cannot control everything in our environment, we can control how we choose to act, speak, and respond to life's challenges. Through mindfulness, self-control, and the cultivation of virtues like wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, we can sidestep these toxic traps and build reputations founded on integrity and understanding. As you move forward, reflect on which habit poses the greatest challenge for you at this moment. Is it the quiet allure of gossip, the seductive ease of overcommitting, the impulsive urge to interject, or the draining cycle of constant complaining? Identify your personal starting point and apply the Stoic strategies that resonate most. Celebrate small victories, those moments when you catch yourself before indulging in a toxic habit and choose a better path. Over time, these little victories accumulate into a significant overhaul of your behavioral patterns. With conscious effort, you'll find that your relationships, both personal and professional, begin to strengthen. Trust deepens when people see that you honor confidences and keep your word. Conversations become more balanced and enriching when you listen intently and speak thoughtfully, and your own mind becomes calmer, more focused on constructive action rather than becoming mired in negativity. Ultimately, respect flows naturally when you consistently demonstrate that you can be relied upon, that you speak with integrity, and that you strive to lift others up rather than tearing them down. This journey, grounded in Stoic principles, not only garners external respect, but also fosters self-respect, a prize well worth any effort you invest. Looking back at these life lessons, I realize each misstep was actually an opportunity in disguise, a chance to learn, to rebuild trust, and to strengthen meaningful connections. Overcoming habits like gossip, unreliability, interrupting, and constant complaining taught me the true meaning of integrity, empathy, and authenticity. But I want to hear from you. Have you struggled with any of these habits yourself? What's your best strategy for breaking the cycle and building respect? Share your experiences in the comments below, and let's open up the conversation. Remember, every mistake is a stepping stone towards becoming the best version of ourselves. Don't forget to subscribe for more honest, down-to-earth insights and tips on living a life full of respect and dignity.